Today on episode 115 of Rail Talk, the jockeys walk out on NYRA. Rudy Rodriguez is in hot water with HISA, and we look forward to the last Cigar Mile day at Aqueduct. I'm Joe Bianca. I'm an ownership advisor at West Point Thoroughbreds. And no, John, this week we miss you and we're thinking about you, buddy, but we have a returning champion back to the show. We didn't scare him away last time. Go ahead, introduce yourself, my friend.
Yeah, Nick Tammaro, glad to be with you again. I'm officially now the racing services manager at Sam Houston Race Park, in addition to doing some work for Twin Spires, and pretty much anybody else will pay me, I think, like I joked about last time.
Well, I think if you get back on the show for a third time, we have to start paying you as well. So keep stacking those checks, Nick. We appreciate you.
1099s are always welcome at my address.
The opinions expressed on Rail Talk are those of hosts Joe Bianca and John Green and do not reflect those of anybody we work with or work for. Rail Talk is sponsored by Facing Tipton. Massive record-breaking year for Facing Tipton on the brick and mortar sales and in the digital sales ring, which just continued to grow. And like I've said it before, but we're coming to the end of the calendar. If you're looking for a turnkey horse that you can put on the track pretty much right away in 2026 in training, start earning some money with them, the digital sales ring is the way to go. And on that note, we're recording this on Wednesday. The December digital sale is December 4th through the 10th, so plenty of time to get involved. Go to digital.facingtipton.com to learn more. Obviously, looking forward to the 2026 sale calendar as well. Looking forward to that Gallop-only sale at the Mid-Atlantic sale, and obviously the big yearling sales in the summer and fall. But in the meantime, if you're not involved in the digital sales ring, you're getting left behind. Tons of, and Nick, you've seen this, I'm sure, in the past performances, all sorts of horses popping up with that digital sales tag. It's an easy way to get a horse that you could turn around quickly and win some races with.
Yeah, you might get pretty good value too. I look at some of the prices on these horses, see that they're probably high price claiming types, but you get an allowance horse for $80,000 or so. Some of these purses out there over the winter, especially if you're headed down to Arkansas, you got a great opportunity to get your money back plus.
Yeah, no doubt. So definitely get involved. Digital.facingtipton.com. You have until December 10th to bid on those offerings. Go check out the catalog now. So I had thought I had seen every single reason to cancel a NYRA card this year, from the fumes from the next door casino forcing a cancellation to the speakers from the car show next door at the casino forcing a cancellation, in addition to all of the weather-related cancellations. And then on Sunday, we saw yet another one, as after the first race, the jockeys who were scheduled to ride that day at Aqueduct basically walked out and just single-handedly terminated the rest of the card. There's a lot of back and forth about what this was about. The jockeys say that there's like a list of grievances that they've had in the past year or so with NYRA management, but the breaking point, the straw that broke the camel's back, was NYRA's management sending the assistant clerk of scales, Brian Pockman, home because they apparently were asking him to manually write the weights in addition to the digital system that normally records them. And this was a bridge too far, and he refused to do it. And NYRA sent him home after the first race, and the jockeys took umbrage with that and said that they were trying to put someone else in charge who would not have been able to do the duties. And, like I said, it did seem like the last straw for them because, individually, this does not seem like something you should strike about and walk out about. But I don't think there's anybody that's blameless here, Nick. And I think that this could have been handled so much better on an off day after the races. And I feel that I sense that you're going to agree with me on this, but I think once again, in addition to the owners, obviously, who, paid for the horses to ship and paid for them to get LASIX and all that, the horse players are the one that suffer. Like we handicapped the card, ready to play pick fives. A lot of people were alive in the pick five after the first leg, and then the card gets torpedoed, and there's never any consideration of us, it feels like. And every time one of these cancellations happens, I feel like there should be a little bit of a mea culpa to the bettors, and we just continue to get stepped on and rarely thought about. But Nick, I'm curious, as someone who's like on the inside of some of these track management issues that come up, what are your thoughts on the jockey walkout at NYRA?
Yeah, I mean, you referenced the airing of grievances. I wish they had waited for Festivus, right? That would have at least been a dark day, and it would have been a little bit more well-received by the betting public. There was a pick six carryover additionally. Right. And, I mean, look, what you said is exactly right. The people who end up really you listed all of them, right? The owners, right? The horsemen, the horse players, Everybody is affected by a situation like this. And it's important for us to remember we seem like the people, the horse playing community, the ones that offer it the most, that we're all in this together. It's not one group over the other. And quite honestly, and I've interacted with Kendrick. I think Kendrick's a nice guy. His quote was a complete embarrassment in the DRF. I mean, what he said about, we're the show and so on and so forth, I'm paraphrasing, is like, no, buddy, you're not. Right? You guys want to continue to do this. They're going to truck in a new batch of jockeys from a lesser circuit that are going to love riding for the opportunity to make more money. And I feel bad for a guy like Lane Luzzy, who put a post on Twitter yesterday that said, I'm a young guy that just wants to ride, not going to get involved in some of the other stuff that's going on. But there's a lot of guys of that ilk, right, that just want to perform their craft and be able to do so. It feels, Joe, like there's the truth, there's lies, and then everything else, there's somewhere in between about what we've heard on this topic. Brian Pochman is a longtime racing employee, a guy I had the pleasure of meeting years ago when he was working at Lone Star. This is not simply about Brian being unable to manually record weights. There's obviously more to this story. I think we can all let our imagination run wild and perhaps have some kernel of truth in some of what we're saying. But either way, what we all can certainly agree on is leaving and ending the card is ridiculous. It is a ridiculous approach to the scenario. It is not a good solution. And it does show an issue with the interaction between the jockey community and the management there, that this couldn't have been meted out in a little bit more timely manner and a little bit better. Luckily, in the ensuing days, we've seen things get better. And now it looks as if racing will go on Thursday. That pick six carryover will move on to Thursday. But the damage is done, right? We lost the card. And a lot of horses had gotten treated with medication that now that all went by the boards, and then horsemen had to pay fees for shipping and whatnot that, obviously didn't get a chance to do so. And you feel for those people for sure.
Yeah, well, and this is we're recording this on Wednesday, and it may not come out till Thursday or Friday. Nick is right that at the moment it seems like they're going to ride on Thursday, and I feel like I'm just going to reiterate the point that I feel like as horse players, we're kind of like the child in the divorce when these things happen. Like, we just kind of get overlooked sometimes between the two warring parties. And again, no acknowledgement whatsoever of the inconvenience to the bettors. And I just think that that's a pattern in this industry that really is turning a lot of people off and, kind of sending some people away as well, just because, like I said, this is not, and I'm not saying these are NYRA's fault, but again, this is not the first ridiculous cancellation that we've had so far this year. We've had a bunch of them. And again, like this is where it would help to have like a commissioner or at least some kind of PR body in the industry that can answer questions, do a press conference, something or other. Because I remember, because when Dave Grenning tweeted out on Sunday, it was like, well, the jockeys are refusing to ride over myriad issues with NYRA management. Everyone was like, what the fuck are they talking about? Like, for hours and hours on end, no one knew what the issue was. And then finally, like, the story comes out later that night with the quotes. And yeah, I agree with you. I like Kendrick a lot, but the idea that like you have to be the star of the show in order to like go ride, I mean, that to me diminishes a lot of other people who make the races go. Like, yes, you guys are a part of the face of the sport. There's a million other people that are responsible for the races being able to be run and for all that handle money to come in. So yeah, I just thought that was a bit of a myopic quote. And I think the issue is, again, like you said, the battle between management and the jockeys, like this stuff needs to be sorted out on a dark day, or, when racing is off for the holidays. Like, I understand that there have been some things that have built up in the jockeys' minds for why they did this, but just on its face, like it didn't seem like it rose to that level. Any of the things that they mentioned, like the issue about like not letting the families and the jocks room, I don't know, that might be a liability thing for NYRA if like nobody's watching them and somebody gets hurt. Like I find it hard to believe, and I'm not taking NYRA's side necessarily in this because I think both parties are at fault. I find it hard to believe that NYRA is like just for fun saying, no more families in the jockeys room, no more kids in the jockeys room. There's got to be a reason why they did that. And I just think there's the breakdown in communication to the point that an entire card almost gets canceled with no notice to the horse players or to the owners. Like, there was a lot of shit that was building up that none of us knew about, Nick. And it seems like these things have to now be, this kind of has to play out in public now. I think that the discussions that are being had between NYRA management and the jockeys, like, people need to be updated. Owners, horse players, people need to be updated on what's happening to make sure this doesn't happen again, you know?
Yeah. I mean, and there's probably a limited number of ways to put a positive spin on it because it's a negative situation. And, there's obviously been some circumstances outside of NYRA's control that's led to some of those cancellations. There have probably been some things that were inside NYRA's control as well. And so it feels in a way, Joe, that what I guess bothers me a little bit just as a fan, and I have a good relationship with a lot of people at NYRA, but I'm somebody who's objective about things, that so much is being put on this opening of Belmont, right? It's like it is such a big deal. And it feels like another scenario where you want to make sure everything is sorted out. And I know this is a blip on the radar relative to all the things that are going to go into having Belmont ready. But, you can explain away the issues with a car show because it's Aqueduct and there's other things going on at Aqueduct. And you can look at some of the limitations of a facility like Aqueduct with regards to how you have to operate. But those have all got to be buttoned up, right? They've got to be taken care of. The relationship between jockeys and management has to be good. We had our own issues at Sam Houston a few years ago with our turf course, and the guy who was running our racing operation at the time has since moved on to Colonial. He's a very good friend of mine, Frank Hoff. And Frank went and into the jockeys room, walked the turf course with the jockeys, had a great level of communication with them. And I said to him all along the way, keep them in the loop, right? There's some veterans in there. They've ridden a long time. They want what you want, which is to be able to ply their trade. We want them obviously doing so. And it ended up working out. It's not always that simple. It sometimes is a little bit more complex. But I'll tell you, Joe, nothing was brought up by anyone that made me believe, oh, yes, you're horribly mistreated. And let's be honest, and I want to be very careful with this. There are a lot of different factions within racing, right? You and I represent one group that basically has no attention paid to it at all because we're horse players. We're expected to just keep showing up. We do so with our dollars over and over. They stack the obstacles for us over and over, higher and higher. They're getting higher and higher by the day. There are a lot of groups that are catered to relatively well. And I would go so far as to say jockeys are one of them, right? And they should be. There's a lot of attention that should be paid to the job that they do. They do a dangerous job. None of us would deny that they do a job where an ambulance follows you around, right? You and I don't do jobs like that. But there are a lot of people out there who have hard jobs as well that aren't as well compensated. We want to make sure we're mindful of making sure they feel comfortable with the job that they're able to do while understanding that they're a key part of a very larger puzzle. And everybody has to be a component part of that puzzle and make it come together. So I'm glad we're doing things like paying attention to jockey mental health and wellness and things like that. We obviously need to make sure that we limit some of the things that are said to them or eradicate altogether the nasty things that are said to them. That's just not really, it's unbecoming of somebody that wants to be part of a game. But at the same time, they need to be expected to do their part, which is work out issues that are going on that can be worked out, such as this, and not make us lose a day of racing.
Yeah, no, 100%. And, whenever things like this happen, I always, compare it in my mind to other sports. Like this would be as if this is like if there was like a Friday night, like marquee NBA game and the players come out for the first quarter and then they stop playing and nobody says anything to the fans specific about why they stopped playing and why they walked off the court. Can you imagine that happening in any other major mainstream sport? Like this is yet another thing that makes this look like a Mickey Mouse sport. And those things just kind of pile up on top of each other where your core customer, the bettor, is going to get sick of it and continue to feel disrespected. Because it's not just the jockeys walking out. It's the lack of communication to your core customer, I think, that really turns people off. And it's just something that would not be accepted in any other mainstream sport. And, the other thing, too, is like I saw some of the quotes from Terry Meeks, who's supposed to be the head of the Jockeys Guild. And it seemed like he was totally in the dark. Like he had no idea what this was about or why this was happening. And I don't know, maybe you need better representation as a jockey if that's supposed to be your leader. And he's giving these quotes to Bill Finley saying like, basically, I don't know why this happened. Like, I don't know. Hopefully you can start racing again. Like, and I don't know. I saw this too with the jockeys, with their defense of Paco Lopez. Like, I didn't think that was necessarily because they love Paco Lopez. I think it was because they feel like they have less than perfect representation and unification in the sport, and that's kind of why they wanted to take that stand. It was also about the whip, I think, in particular. But I don't know, like that was surprising to me the way they rallied around him, and I think it's maybe because they don't feel like they have the union that they should. at, in this game. And the other thing, and Nick, I'm going to throw this at you just because you mentioned Belmont Park and the, kind of putting all the eggs in the new Belmont Park basket. There's a pretty big development this week in New York City with the approval of 3 major live table game casinos. They're gonna build out the one at Resorts World, which is already there but doesn't have live table games. So they're gonna have it be a full-fledged casino once Aqueduct is gone. Then there's one in the Bronx where the Trump golf course used to be, and then there's one that's going to be at City Field, which is in Flushing, which is not that far from Belmont. Aqueduct is obviously not that far from Belmont. Nick, I'm curious if you had any reaction to that, because that kind of seems like another stumbling block possibly. Belmont's going to get to open, I think, before the other 2, brand new casinos are going to open. Probably going to take a couple of years for that. But that worried me a little bit, Nick, because like you say, they're putting all their eggs in this Belmont basket, and it's going to be hard. It's going to be an increasing challenge, I think, to attract people out there with so many other gaming options around.
Yeah, it's going to take a creative marketing effort, no doubt about it. I think one of the areas that I've advocated for in terms of how we need to focus a lot of our marketing effort is the game of skill potential to younger people. I think people in their 20s and 30s, and I've done no demographic study. I'm no sociologist by any means, but I've been around a lot of people in their 20s and 30s, especially in the last few years, early 30s. I'm 41 now, so I'm getting old. I don't think they're terribly moved by casinos, Joe. I don't think they have our fathers, mothers mentality towards casinos, if you will. And, I don't think those places are going to be inundated with people that maybe they could become horse players, right? Maybe they could be shown that this is a game that you can learn, and perhaps if we level the playing field a bit in terms of being able to bet it and be successful with it, they can be a little bit more moved by that. They don't strike me necessarily as a generation that's overly enthused by a casino game. Again, this is me just opining. This is not based on any data that I have. 3 casinos in the 5 boroughs, and that's a lot, right? There's 3 mega places. We have aspirations long-term in Texas of maybe having 3 across the state, and we have a lot of people here. But you guys have a lot of people around the boroughs, so it's going to be a challenge, undoubtedly, to get people to come out. Obviously, you'll have a big bounce from the fact that a state-of-the-art facility is being brought in. I think the ability to market to families is going to be huge because there's going to be so much backyard space. And, you and I both know it's a great place to spend an afternoon in the summer. The additional challenge, of course, is that they're not just going to be running there in the summer anymore. They're going to be running there in the winter, where it's a lot harder to get out there with weather and such and whatnot. But I think as long as a coordinated effort for getting the word out that this is a new beginning, a new opportunity, a place that obviously is now adjacent to a major sporting venue in the stadium right next door, US or UBS Arena, which obviously has some appeal as well for hockey fans that might want to come out and watch the races and then go over to the Islanders game. So I'm hopeful that it's going to be done. I'm confident that they're already working on it. And we're looking at it now being less than roughly 9 months away.
Yeah, no, and I can't wait. And I hope you're right that there is a sustained marketing campaign to get people out to the races, because like you say, this could be a new beginning if it's handled right. I will say anecdotally, the guys in my group chat are pretty into casinos, but that's just one handful.
We're all in our 40s, but
yeah. No, true. Yeah, we're thinking about younger people than us. Damn it. But yeah, no, I hope that that's true, and that it's kind of an older demographic that's more into casinos. But again, I go back to the point where, just in the era of increasing competition, whether it's casinos, whether it's sports betting, you can't have things like what happened on Sunday at Aqueduct. You just can't. It wouldn't be acceptable in any other form of gambling. But again, the horse players are the last thought of group still somehow in this business. We have not learned that lesson. And, John and I talk about it a lot. Everybody in this climate, everybody's got to be a steward of the game as a whole. You can't just focus on your slice of the pie 100% of the time. And that's something that's plagued this business for a long time. And I think about the jockeys and I think about NYRA, and I'm not saying that the jockeys don't have some legitimate beefs, but did any of them for a second think of how the horse players would be affected by canceling this card? I find it hard to believe that they did. We get stepped on a lot, and with the casinos and with sports betting around, this is not going to be a good look for us in trying to attract new bettors to the game. And that should be the number one priority for everybody. everybody in this industry, number one priority should be attracting new customers. We've done a shitty job of it for a long time, and these kind of self-inflicted wounds do not help.
Agreed. Right. I mean, look, there's two groups of people that put money into the game: owners and horse players. Owners and horse players are the ones that put their money in. And it doesn't mean that we're always right or that we're the ones that should singularly be catered to, or the dual group. But it means that we should have a voice. We should have a seat at the table. Owners should as well. If you've bought a horse, you've bought into a horse, you've claimed a horse, whatever it is, you've put money out there. You've probably lost money because it is not generally a money-making endeavor. You've undoubtedly had a ton of fun with it. If you've bet on races, perhaps you've enjoyed it. I've obviously loved it for the last 30 plus years. There are days where it's more frustrating than not, but I'm going to continue to vote with my money. And that matters. And that obviously has to be paid attention to if we're ever going to have any ability to move forward.
Rail Talk is sponsored by the Green Group, the number one accounting firm in the horse business. No other CPA firm knows the horse industry like they do. Len and DJ Stable have over 200 horses. They've won over 2,600 races. Been obviously a banner year for them. Looking forward to Nitrogen being crowned champion 3-year-old filly at the Eclipse Awards in just under 2 months. And on the business side, the Green Group has close to 1,000 clients in the horse business because they make them money and save them taxes. I know many Rail Talk listeners have already taken advantage of this offer. And if you haven't, you should as well. Get a jump on your 2025 taxes. There's a complimentary confidential half-hour consultation in it for you where Len guarantees he will find you value. And all you got to do is call him up at what's that number, Michael Agresta? 732-634-5100. Green Group. He needs to put out like a Christmas album of those jingles or something because it works for us every single week. Do it before year's end. Like I said, you want to get involved. You want to get in touch with Len for your 2025 taxes. I'm sure he's already got a bunch of people reaching out to him. So don't get left behind in line. There's nobody else in the horse business that you want taking care of your taxes and your accounting needs. You can also go to greenco.com and learn how they can help you there. But you don't have to take it from me. Take it to another satisfied customer, another big shot in this business who we got a lot of respect for. 2-year-old consigner of the stars, Nick Tammaro.
We've actually known Len and his family, but Len in particular, for a long time. In fact, we knew Len when he was a struggling accountant doing the books for his local Pizza Hut. Not many people know that. But anyway, all joking aside, we consider Len not just a very good friend, but beyond a competent accounting, who runs beyond an efficient accounting firm. He has saved us so much money over the years, and during that time we have become very good friends, and he's been a loyal supporter of our business here, and I can honestly say that we feel very privileged to be included in his sphere of activity and in his circle, because he has much bigger and more important clients than us, I'm sure.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Len and the Green Group for your support all year. We appreciate you guys. Once again, if you want to take advantage of that complimentary consultation from Len and the Green Group, call them up at 732-634-5100 or go to greenco.com. All right, so I promise we'll get to some racing at some point, but there was another major news story over the weekend about Rudy Rodriguez and HISA basically kind of opening an investigation into him, alleging multiple violations of its equine welfare rules. They served a notice to him on November 21st and was shared with his attorney, Clark Brewster, and said, I'm quoting for the Blood Horse story here, asserts that the trainer failed to provide required veterinary care and diagnostic follow-up for horses placed on the veterinarian's list. Several of these horses died. There were 16 horses in total that he allegedly failed to do diagnostic follow-ups with after they were put on the vet's list. And, you can go on the TDN or Blood Horse and check out like a list of all the horses and kind of the circumstances behind them and then what happened afterwards. And it's pretty damning, honestly. And especially not just the horses that died. There were several horses that not only allegedly didn't get veterinary care, after they were put on the vets list, but ended up at Mountaineer with Juan Vasquez, who, if we remember, was banned from New York racing for being such a poor steward of the health of his horses. You know, we heard about a horse who was like shipped to Belmont and was in such poor condition when he arrived that, you know, they had to euthanize the horse, like a real bad guy. And to me, that's the most damning thing out of all of this. You know, it's not even just the not doing the follow up on the vet care. It's when you ship a horse after they're on the vets list in New York to a non-HISA state to run with a notorious shithead in terms of taking care of his horses, to run for $5,000. To me, that's unacceptable. And Nick, I saw a lot of people responding to this because everybody has to be so reflexively anti-HISA in every single circumstance. I'm not saying they've handled everything great, but every single time they come out with a ruling now, it's the worst thing that's ever happened to racing. I saw a lot of people doing the old, Rudy's a good guy defense. You know, it's Rudy. I've seen him. He takes care of his horses. He's a great guy. And listen, I like Rudy. I like him a lot. I see him at Aqueduct all the time in the Horseman's Lounge. Always got a smile on his face. Always says hello to everybody. Good sense of humor. You know, hardcore, you know, racing fan. And he's a very affable and easy to like guy. That is not an excuse for any of this stuff if it is indeed true, and it seems like a pretty high stack of evidence against him. This is what we tried to avoid, because I guarantee you, and I'm not comparing Rudy to these guys, but I guarantee you, earlier when we had our suspicions about Jason Service and Jorge Navarro, there was a line of people behind them who would say they were great guys and they, you know, barking up the wrong tree and all this stuff. That is not a good defense against a mountain of evidence. Everybody pretty much in this game can find somebody to say, hey, I had a good experience with this guy. He's a good guy. You shouldn't go after him. That's not a defense. It's not a defense in the court of law. And it sure as hell shouldn't be a defense when it comes to the potential neglect of the horses who put their lives on the line for us every single race. Nick, what's your reaction?
Yeah, I mean, our first two topics on here were regarding NYRA and HISA, which are probably collectively the two most reflexively anti-organizations as far as the public goes. You know, I mean, things could happen. You and I were on a HISA Next Gen call a couple of months ago with regards, I think it was to Paco, and I said, you know, if the New York State Gaming Commission meted out this punishment, it probably wouldn't have even got a click or any attention. But the fact that HISA did it made it the greatest atrocity since God knows when, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, the good guy defense is ridiculous. It's tiresome. Guess what, everybody? A lot of nice guys have done bad things over time, right? A lot of bad guys have done nice things over time, too. It's just how the world works. And if you think that you can justify potential bad behavior with, well, he's a nice guy, or he's treated me very well, anything like that, forget about it. This situation stinks. And the Juan Vasquez horses started popping up a few months ago. I had somebody tell me about it. Obviously didn't like the way that had gone down. You know, as far as HISA goes, everybody is focused on the small things that are, it's foolish to pay a great deal of attention to those. And I know there are people that'll probably clip this and say, you know, oh, look at how full of shit he is. But, you know, every time it's like, well, this is what 85 million a year has gotten us. It's like, why would you boil it down to that, right? Why would you boil it down to, first of all, 2/3 of that money is allocated to testing. I will stand by, and you know, because we said similar things on the very first HISA related call you and I were on. I want you to catch bad actors. That's what I want HISA to be about. I want you to catch bad actors, whether they're cheats, whether they're criminals, whatever the hell they're doing. I want you to find those people and get rid of them. I don't care if they win at a 25% clip or a 2% clip. I want them gone, right? Because at the end of the day, I care about animal welfare. I care about the horses being kept up with and being treated well. And obviously that makes for safety amongst the riders as well. It makes the track's jobs a lot easier. And if you have this number of horses end up on the vets list and this number break down, you need a hell of a lot more than your peers or your fans or people on social media saying, well, he's a really nice guy. You know, it's just not going to work. It's not, that defense is long gone. So this is a list of things that is awfully damning. And I'm sure you feel similarly that there are some people who I saw posts from in support of him. And I thought, geez, man, did you think about that before hitting reply? You really want to be on that side of it. But this is a situation where I want to be on the side of whomever is going after people that are behaving inappropriately.
And I know he's gonna call me out again and call me a shill and sick all of his loser minions on me again for this. But Mike Rapoli, a guy who is justifiably in the side of providing aftercare for our horses and how important that is. What about the horses on the track? What about these horses who allegedly were not given the correct care, many of whom died, some of which ended up at West Virginia tracks, which we all know is the wild fucking West, and at Mountaineers, some of the saddest racing you can imagine down there with those 4,000 claimers, broken down horses. How can you possibly defend those horses after being put on the vets list, being sent to West Virginia to run for cheap tags? Like, that is completely indefensible. And I know you have a relationship with Rudy, and again, I personally like Rudy a lot, but how can you look at this list of 16 horses who were allegedly not provided veterinary care, many of which died, some of which ended up at Mountaineer, and say that this is okay if you care about horse welfare? You can't do it. And it's incredibly frustrating, because this is the exact kind of thing, Nick, along with, the cheaters in the past. This is the kind of thing that if it happened before HISA, the same people would be up in arms and complaining like, where is anybody to do anything about this? Like, why is no one stepping up and speaking up for the horses? And now when someone actually does it, you have a problem with that. And it's government overreach. And I'm just so tired of people talking out of both sides of their mouths, where they think, that they're all for the horses' safety and catching the cheaters. And then when somebody tries to step up for the horses and their safety and tries to bust some guys for some medications that a lot of people I think are being used to juice horses, then it's a huge problem. Like, I'm really tired of it. And like I said, you can go and read all of the individual instances and what happened to those horses. The only possible defense I could come up with is that he didn't log them into the HISA portal. And I think that would be a very, very flimsy defense, because, just knowing from some of the inner workings, HISA sends out warnings about this kind of thing. They don't wait and then jump on you when they have enough evidence and say, ha, gotcha. They send out warnings. They did it for Paco. Like they were always, everybody was like, oh, here they go with the gotcha on Paco. They sent him many, many warnings for his violations before they actually issued that suspension, and he just ignored them. And this is tough, because in addition to, obviously the horse toll, Dylan Davis is in the hospital because of heavyweight champs' breakdown. That horse broke down in front of his horse. Dylan took a huge fall. He's got a broken collarbone. He's got the broken ribs. He said this was the worst injury of his life. I'm sure his life flashed before his eyes. He could have been killed in that instance. So it's not just about the horses, as important as that is. Nick, this also puts the jockeys in danger when you put unsound horses on the track.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's another fatality as well. So we're trying to improve what's going on there. It's a bad deal, right? There's no winner in this scenario whatsoever. And, one thing about Mike Rapoli, and I actually replied to him on this very topic, and he replied to me, you, Mike, and I share heritage, and one of our failings at times is loyalty, right? Amongst that community. Mike is very loyal to the people who he's worked with. It even created an erroneous opinion on his part about the Jockey Club Gold Cup, where he blamed Dylan instead of Kendrick. Kendrick's a rider that Todd Pletcher regularly uses. Nothing wrong with loyalty, and he's been a highly successful man. I'm sure he's been loyal to the right people as well. I hope he continues to be loyal to my good friend Pat Cummings. He's my daughter's godfather. So I have plenty of reason to believe in Pat. And obviously, Mike replied to me and said, don't you want what I want? Of course I want what you want, right? I want the health and welfare of the game long term. I want all those things. That's not what we're talking about. If you're for the health and welfare of the game, you want guys that are doing stuff like that gone. It doesn't matter if they've trained horses for you. It doesn't matter what else they've. Doesn't matter if they're a nice guy. You want people like that gone. You don't want them around if that's the way they're going to treat the horses. At the end of the day, those trainers are the absolute and ultimate insurers of those horses. And if that's how they're behaving and putting them in harm's way, as you're saying, there's a huge ripple effect in terms of who else could potentially be affected by it. Those are the kind of people that we want gone. You can't say, HISA this, HISA that. HISA's not doing anything. You and I both know, everybody out there listening knows, Lisa Lazarus knows there are flaws with HISA. Undoubtedly. There are things that she probably would have liked to have done differently 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, 1 month ago. There are things she would change right now. However, when you're talking about an imperfect body trying to make the best get to the best results possible, you're going to have times where people don't understand what you did, don't necessarily agree with what you did. You can't let that govern or dictate what you do. And if what you're doing is trying to make the game safer, that is the mission of the organization at the end of the day. Getting people that are doing things that are putting horses in harm's way, vets list horses, breakdowns, things like that. These need to be looked at regularly. You and I touched on the post Breeders' Cup episode about the veterinarians. You know, and I said it, you said it, Christina Blacker said it. We all have different perspectives, but we're similar in that we don't want these people's integrity impugned, right? We don't win with that. We don't win when we say, oh, the vets have a vendetta. They're just there after all those Kenny McPeek horses. No. It's not about that. It's not about Kenny McPeek. It's about horses. It's about horse welfare. It's about making sure that healthy horses fit to run are put on the racetrack. If they overreach with it a little bit, it kind of happens. It's going to happen. If you're a rational person, you'll realize it. I'm glad Richard Mandela wants to run Tammaro back pretty soon. I hope he's able to do so. I trust his decision-making process, just as I trust the vets on their part.
Yeah, and like we talked about, you have to walk the walk. You can't just talk the talk in terms of horse safety being the number one priority. Like it just, you have to actually back it up with support for the vets. And I just wish, and again, like people are going to call me a HISA shill for this. I could give a shit. I wish I could transport all of those people back to 2018 and 2019 and make them remember how outraged they were about the absolute lack of accountability for cheating trainers, for horse trainers that were breaking down horses left and right. There was absolutely no there was no rectification of that anywhere on the horizon. There was no even promise of a solution to those issues. And this is an imperfect solution, as Nick said, but it arose because of that, because we were so embarrassed by the Santa Anita breakdowns, by the FBI raids, busting Jorge Navarro and Jason Service. This didn't come about because the government decided to get involved. They could care less. You think the government wants to be involved in horse racing? This came about because of a screaming 5-alarm fire that we had in this sport. And I'm just so tired of, even in the cases of obvious neglect in terms, like I said, even beyond just the lack of the lack of diagnostics for the horses that are on the vets list, the horses that got sent to Mountaineer. You tell me, you look me in the eye and you tell me that there is a realistic explanation for why that happened with horses who were on the vets list that doesn't involve trying to skirt the rules and trying to jam them in and get a purse before they inevitably, go on to hopefully retire, but sometimes worse. And that leads me into another thing I want to talk about us from over the weekend. Nick, I'm sure you saw this. It made the rounds on Twitter a little bit. Up at Woodbine, a horse named Midday Image broke down and had to be euthanized, trained by Norman McKnight. So somebody a lot of people have had whispers about over the years. This horse was 9 years old, ran like 100 buyers, 90-something buyers, had been a very, very good and profitable horse for his owners for a really long time. And here he was in, what was it, a 4,500 claimer, like whatever the bottom level was at Woodbine. Here he was running in that race, and he broke down and he died. And we talked about this on the Breeders' Cup show, where we were talking about, the kind of your analogy was like it's like the punch drunk boxer who like should be retired and is still fighting and clearly is a shell of themselves and is putting themselves in danger. This is a horse who should have been retired a long time ago. And, you can blame the current trainer, and I would put certainly a lot of blame on him as well. But I think you should also blame a lot of the people that failed him along the way. And I say this, with some credibility, because I want to shout out some of the people at West Point, because we do this pretty frequently. If we have a horse that we used to run that got claimed away from us, we keep tabs on them. And if we see them running for $5,000 or whatever it is at Evangeline Downs, we will almost always put the money up, claim that horse back, and then retire them. The responsibility does not end when that horse is no longer running under your name. And this is the consequence of jamming horses, especially older horses, into races over and over and over again when they're potentially unsound. And every horse deserves a nice retirement, but especially one that made so much money for so many people along the way. This made me sick to my stomach, Nick. And this is the kind of thing we're trying to eradicate from the game.
Yeah, look, 59 career starts, over 540,000 in earnings, a horse that had won 13 races on turf and another one on synthetic. Actually, his last start prior to the day where he actually met his demise, unfortunately, at the $4,500 level. Worth throwing in there. Don't necessarily want to throw more gas on the fire, but owned by a guy who was suspended for a period of time in 15 years ago or so in Bruno Chicadans. So, what happens in these scenarios is bad. It's bad from top to bottom. There's nothing good to glean from it. You and I will get to something positive at some point during this show.
We will talk racing, I promise. At some point,
will. We both love the game too. I guarantee you that.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why you talk about things like this. I'm not shy about being so bold as to say these are the kind of situations that will ultimately lead to us getting out of the claiming game altogether. And I think there's a lot of challenges with that. There are some potential pitfalls of it as well. I still think claiming is the easiest entry point for a new owner. That's probably the biggest loss in doing so. But these scenarios are so egregious and they're so, and I want to be careful about it too, because the horse player in me wants to say the horse was competitive in his last few starts. At the same time, it's the humanitarian in you wants to say there's something else this horse could have been doing. Right. He could have been on the farm helping out prisoners. He could have been attorney for home in Pennsylvania. He could have been in a lot of these different places where he could have just been living his life and deserved to kick his heels up a little bit. And he didn't get that opportunity. And that's what's unfortunate about it. And it also, I think the thing that I read that bothered me the most about it was that Conrad Banderoff offered to buy the horse like a couple of months ago because he controlled a lot of the Generazio dispersal, and he wasn't given that opportunity. And that really sucks, right? Because he was going to do the right thing. There's no question in my mind. He was buying the horse to retire him. And that would have been really the right thing because he deserved better. And unfortunately, there are a lot of midday images out there that we don't know about. There are a lot of horses out there that are disappearing from racetracks or obviously having issues that they run into at various times in the morning and afternoon. And they deserve better than that. So ultimately, part of our overall endeavor in this game is the health and welfare of horses and the humans that are responsible for them. But when we lose sight of that, we obviously run into some issues.
Rail Talk is sponsored by Epic Insurance Brokers, one of the nation's top retail insurance brokers, providing expertise across key lines of insurance like property and casualty, employee benefits, and unique specialty insurance. And our buddy, Chris Moore, is the head of Epic's equine specialty practice. And that's a fitting role for him because he lives and breathes this game. He owns horses himself. You see him at the sales, at the races, on Twitter, posting big performances that he sees. You can see him on the backstretch as well. He's all over the place. Start a conversation with him. This is the kind of guy you want in charge of your equine insurance policies. You can call him or text him at 317-650-4519. This is the time to January 1st insurance renewal date is right around the corner. You need to unify those policies. Is your mortality insurance guy different than your farm insurance guy? Could be an issue. This is the time to review the meat and potatoes of your insurance program. And no one better to do it than Chris. And he guarantees he'll bring you value by reviewing any of your equine business insurance policies. He's that guy. We love him, and you're going to love him and the job that Epic does for you. And that leads us to this week's
Epic Performance of the Week.
And this week's epic performance of the weekend, Nick, I thought it was going to be from one of the stakes races over the weekend, but there really wasn't anybody that blew us away. So we're going to go to the Stars of Tomorrow finale on Saturday, and Cannoneer, who was a dominant winner by Into Mischief, owned by Spendthrift. And obviously not a secret in terms of the purchase price was a $1.75 million Keeneland September buy. He was the 8-5 favorite, but he really blew them away. Won by 7 1/4 lengths, stopped the timer and for 7 furlongs in 1:21.3. Well-related horse, half brother to Gervin, Midnight Bourbon as well. A couple of Pirates Punch, who was a nice hard-knocking graded stakes winner. Cocked and Loaded, another graded stakes winner. A very, very nice family here. Obviously, that was known when he was bought for $1.75 million. But Nick, I feel like he even exceeded expectations.
Yeah, just an incredibly impressive performance, and obviously a super well-bred horse, as you alluded to, with all of that in the family tree. A horse that Brad Cox did get started a little early back in early June, but that ended up being a pretty key race with Comport coming back to win multiple stakes afterwards, and obviously he's a little bit better now later in the year. I think he'll stretch out. There were as many sprinters in what you rattled off in terms of some of the siblings, sprinter miler types, as there were classic routers. But we'll see where Brad ends up sending this horse over the winter and how quickly we see him back, because he's one who you'd think would probably target a race like the Holy Bull coming up in a couple of months at Gulfstream.
Yeah, especially on a weekend, and we'll see what happens with the Remsen, but on a weekend where the 2-year-olds didn't really, perform up to expectations, you kind of looking maybe for a new shooter going into 2026. This might be that guy. Cannoneer is this week's epic performance of the week. Real Talk is sponsored by TaylorMade. Appreciate the TaylorMade family for all their support. Obviously, the Stallion Barn is on the rise. Not this time, is now firmly cemented as one of the top 3 stallions in the game. But I think there's a lot of other good value stallions on that roster. West Point has 2 early votings that we're really excited about. I think that Tacitus is going to break out as his horses start to get a little bit older. Idol, I think, is a horse also that's good. Those horses are going to get better as they stretch out in distance. 8-10 furlongs and up. Arthur's Ride is a new addition to the stallion roster. So I do think that there are some value stallions now that are going to increase in importance and relevance as the years go on. And TaylorMade has done a good job of scouting that kind of talent. So check out TaylorMadeStallions.com, obviously TaylorMadeFarm.com. You can check out all of their racing opportunities, all of the boarding opportunities, and obviously all of the work that they do with their consignments as well. They're the leading consignor pretty much every yearling sale. They do an incredible job. John, obviously, and DJ Stable use them a ton. All class people that love the horses, love the business, and will put you in the best chance, the best opportunity, the best spotlight to sell your horse. So congratulations on a big year to the TaylorMade family. Looking forward to more success in all facets of the industry in 2026. Check them out at TaylorMadeFarm.com. So we promised we'd get to some racing talk. This is honestly what we prefer to talk about. We prefer to talk about performances on the racetrack and races we're looking forward to. But unfortunately, some of the bullshit gets in the way sometimes in this sport, and we got to address it. But there was a big holiday weekend of racing, both at Del Mar and at Churchill Downs. I think even though there were a couple of grade 1s out at Del Mar, I think the headliner of the weekend was the Clark on Friday night, and it was won by Magnitude. And we talked about this last week about how he's a real interesting horse, I think, going forward, to be like an older horse that makes sense and makes an impact in some of these big races in 2026. I was kind of underwhelmed by that race. It was a good race in terms of like an exciting race. And I think that Chunk of Gold actually ran huge to go out to the front and keep fighting like that. And he just got tagged for second late by Hit Show. Magnitude was jumped to his wrong lead late. He only got 100 buyer for the race. I was expecting a better performance, but it's obviously, I don't want to kill a horse too much for winning a huge grade 2. Nick, what did you think about the Clark?
Yeah, I think the thing that makes me feel better about the race he ran overall is that he rated, which I think I had a lot of doubt about whether he'd really ever be able to do that. So the fact that he sat off of Chunk of Gold, and he kind of labored to get by him. He didn't exactly blow his doors off, and he did swap to his wrong lead late, something that he's done with frequency. Ironically, something Gunrunner did actually quite a bit during his career as well, especially when he was a little bit younger. He got more polished as he got older. That, I think, was the positive to get from it. It wasn't a knock your socks off performance by any means, but I think he was probably, he didn't get mentioned for this race until about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I'm sure Steve had it targeted. The question to me will be, what will they do with him throughout the winter? I'm hopeful that they eschew any temptation to go overseas. Obviously, Steve did send Gunrunner to the Dubai World Cup in 2017. I'm hopeful that we don't see a trip like that made, just because I think this is a horse that can really benefit from some domestic racing. Steve more or less makes his home in the winter at the 2 tracks that offer the best races after the Pegasus, both at Oaklawn and Fairgrounds. So I'm hopeful he stays in one of those. Joe Christopher mentioned the New Orleans Classic to Steve in the interview afterwards, and Steve seemed to be pretty receptive of that. The person, the Oaklawn Handicap, is probably going to make that a little bit more tempting, but there's a pathway for him to run in both potentially. So, and then obviously you'd be talking about races like potentially the Met Mile, the Foster, Whitney. You would think that he's going to be worthy of those because, of course, what we'd project is that he's going to get better. And I think we'll project as well the Chunk of Gold will get better. If this was I think this was the swan song for First Mission. Adios. Right. I'm glad to see him kind of go. He was a horse that I liked for a period of time that just never really fulfilled his potential, and ready for a new batch of older horses next year. And with the 3-year-olds we know are coming back. We know journalism's coming back. think Sovereignty's coming back. Now we know Magnitude is back and is solid. Baeza is solid. Chunk of Gold is solid. All of a sudden, this older horse division is looking a little bit better.
Yeah, and I just think I thought it was a good first step last year when Sierra Leone and Fierceness came back. I'm hopeful that maybe the tide's turning a little bit of bringing some of these top 3-year-olds back to race as older horses. Obviously, in certain cases, like if you got a Triple Crown winner or something like that, it's going to be tough to justify that. But I'm hopeful that the era of he's done enough. And he's run 5 times and is a 3-year-old. I'm hoping that era is behind us a little bit, because it does help, I think, to have names that people recognize continue to race beyond just their 3-year-old season. Some of the other results from the weekend at Churchill, Lush Lips won the Mrs. Revere Stakes. I know John had been kind of against her in that race, and she wasn't dominant or anything, but she got the job done. She's had a really nice year. Further ado, Nick, I thought, coming off that 98 buyer, he was very highly regarded. He did win, only got an 81. I'm curious if that race at Keeneland proves to be an outlier, because I wasn't that impressed with him, even though he did get the job done.
Me too. Yeah, it does make you wonder if that's going to be one of those performances that just kind of exists in isolation. And I would have never thought I'd say this after his maiden win, but maybe he wants to go a little shorter. I mean, he was really, really struggling, I thought, to put away Soldier and Diplomat. Soldier and Diplomat really hit a wall inside the final 8th after running a big race up to that point, final 16th probably, to be a little bit more kind. And that was when Further Ado kind of gave the image of pulling away a little bit, but he really wasn't. He really never extended himself. He barely went faster than the fillies in the Goldenrod, barely went faster than some 2-year-old colts earlier on in the program. I've been told by people I trust the inside was where you wanted to be. He was outside the whole way. I've got to watch the replays again and see a little bit of that, see if maybe I adopt that mentality. But it'll be very interesting to see where he goes first time in 2026. I would assume with the common ownership with Ted Noffey, we're going to see Further Ado outside of South Florida, or maybe in races where Ted Noffey isn't, perhaps. Because my understanding is he's going to Payson. So he's going to be in South Florida. Whether he ends up taking more of a Fairgrounds or Oaklawn route to Kentucky will be interesting. But I think you could probably pencil him in for the Bluegrass long term.
Yeah, for sure. And then I wanted to mention the Del Mar races real quick. Salamis won the Hollywood Derby, and Sagesta won the Matriarch. So Chad Brown, big surprise, sweeps the grade 1s out at Del Mar. It seems to be his playground this time of the year. Hope Road won the Bayacoa pretty impressively, but I feel like there wasn't that much behind her. But I know, Nick, I'm pretty sure you were impressed specifically with Sagesta and the Matriarch.
Yeah, Sagesta put together a pretty good resume this year, and I think it was easy to overlook because she ran in some nondescript races middle of the year, didn't run that great in the Just a Game. I would encourage anybody who thinks that, though, to go and watch the ride again. It was awfully interesting, but came back, ran well in the Matchmaker, ran well in the First Lady, just a solid horse. Flavian gave her an incredibly confident ride. Interestingly, she and Salamis are siblings, and they are each out of Antono, who Chad won the Just a Game with in 2017. I don't know if you remember the race, but she flew up the inside.
I loved her.
Yeah. I remember hearing that week leading up, she was really good. And I actually bet her in the Belmont Stakes contest. And they returned it for home. And I thought, what the hell is he doing going to the rail? But she exploded through there. So, yeah, a couple of foals winning. I think Salamis could end up being a nice 4-year-old on turf next year as well. He seems to be getting better. It does seem like Chad wants to keep him shorter. Test Score looks like an interesting horse for races like the Manhattan and the maybe the Churchill Downs race, the Woodford or Old Forester Bourbon Classic.
I feel like it's a different bourbon every year.
It's a different bourbon every year. Yeah, it feels like the Woodford Reserve is what it should be, but yeah. So you'd imagine them in those classic type turf races. They both seem like very solid, useful horses.
Yeah. And just to spin it forward to this weekend, it's going to be a sad day for us Aqueduct diehards. Cigar Mile Day was always one of my favorite days on the calendar. It's kind of like the last big day of the racing year before, things start to rev up at Gulfstream early in the new year. And, it's lost its grade 1 status. And looking at this year's field, I can't really be too mad about that, but you do have some hard knocking horses in there. There's still a $500,000 purse. Interestingly enough, I think a New York bred has a real good chance to win the last Cigar Mile at Aqueduct, which I think would be kind of fitting because Aqueduct is really like New York's track, New York City's track at least. So Doc Sullivan's got a big shot. Horse to beat is Phileas Fogg, who we haven't seen since he kind of gave it up late to Locked in the Woodward. I think he's more so going to be known this year for the horse in the Jockey Club Gold Cup, who came in and did dump IRAD and kind of screwed that race up a little bit. But he's been a really nice claim and has just done really good things this year, winning the Suburban, second in the Pimlico Special, had a really nice campaign. He's 3 for 5 at Aqueduct with 2 seconds, so he likes the track. He's drawn outside. But Nick, I thought there was enough speed in this race to potentially set it up for Crazy Mason. And I know he's not going to be a huge prize simply because IRAD is riding, but this is a horse that I think has been dying to go a 1-turn mile. He won the Carter this year, just got up, going 7 furlongs. Then he ran in the True North, which is 6.5. He ran the Bing Crosby, which is 6. Got up for 3rd late in the Forego, got up for 2nd late in the Vosburg. I think I haven't seen the morning line yet. I'm hoping to get at least 4 or 5 to 1 on him. I think this is the day for him. How did you see the Cigar Mile looking at it?
Yeah, one of the fun things about these miles, whether it's, eventually we'll get the Met Mile back around 1 turn, Cigar Mile, is that you have sprinters meeting routers, and Crazy Mason versus Phileas Fogg feels like the best example of that. Now, Crazy Mason is an interesting sprinter in that he's a dead last closer. And you wonder, not all flat miles are made the same. There are versions of it. I would say Aqueduct probably plays like more of an elongated sprint, where Belmont to me always played like more of a short route, in that, you might get a stretched out sprinter at Aqueduct that gets real brave on the front end. Crazy Mason's got, obviously, Irad Ortiz Jr. is one of the best riders around, period, but specifically with an off the pace horse, he can time things up so well. I honestly, Joe, I think the mile is exactly perfect for Phileas Fogg. So I think he's going to get a great trip on the outside. It's interesting to me that Joel Rosario, who has been on 3 different horses in this race, on whom he won he was on 2 other horses on whom he won their most recent start, and opted to go to Phileas Fogg, which it feels like Joel could be a really good fit for him, just kind of getting him to settle right on the outside. He's been specifically good at Aqueduct as well. That Excelsior back in April, that was a day where we had the Bluegrass and Santa Anita Derby and just a lot going on. I don't think people really noticed how well he ran the Queens County also at the end of December of 2024 in the slop. He just ran a hole in the wind. And I think there was some conversation afterwards about him going to a race like the Pegasus. So he's a horse with a lot of talent. He's obviously very, very quick. The blinkers going on is a little interesting, perhaps maybe to be able to throttle him down a little bit, because he did get short late in the Woodward last time out, but I think he'll be pretty tough all in all in a race that obviously was supposed to include Rated by Merit, who would have been very interesting coming back off a big win last out in the Dwyer, but was unable to go here. So hopefully we'll see him eventually down the line a little bit. And it is amazing to think about this being the last Cigar Mile run at Aqueduct. It's always been, as you said, it's like the party at the Overlook Hotel before Jack Nicholson takes over, right? I don't want to use too much of an ominous analogy for what could happen in the future, but it is right before the winter sets in, right? So it was always the funnest card before we knew we were getting, 3 or 4 months of obviously lesser caliber racing. And this will look different at Belmont. The Remsen and Demwazal will look different at Belmont, right? There'll be 1-turn races. Perhaps they'll be shortened because there's no real reason to run them at 1 1/8. And the Remsen actually this year came up a terrific race as well. So it's a fun card. The couple of New York Stallion Series races have big fields also, and really kind of spice up those late sequences.
Yeah, we're running She's Country in the Philly version of the New York Stallion Series race. It's such an interesting race because, for $500,000, you probably only got to run a 70 buyer, maybe in the mid 70s to win that race. So she's never been on dirt, but for that purse, it's such a no brainer, because not just restricted to New York breds, but New York Stallion progeny, and how many of those could there possibly be? So yeah, a big field. I think that adds a little bit of spice to it. And, Brian Bouye did a great piece on the NYRA website about the history of the Cigar Mile and the Remsen and the Demoiselle, which I posted on Twitter, which I think is worth reading. And, there was the NYRA Mile, and then Cigar won it by 8 lengths or whatever. And, eventually it was named after him. So definitely a race that's steeped in tradition and has a lot of really impressive and noteworthy winners over the years. I did want to get your take on the Remsen, because it is an interesting and deep race. You got Talkin, who was second in the Champagne, in a race where I feel like nobody else really ran other than Napoleon Solo, but he does look like a major contender on paper. And then you got the rematch of the 1-2, and again, every DQ is the worst DQ that ever happened, but there was a lot of consternation about this DQ on the October 17th race when Renegade came up and beat Paladin by a head, and it was eventually DQ'd. Nick, what did you think of that DQ? And then you can go on to say what you think about this race.
Yeah, it was, I don't want to say it was too dubious, but I think there's obviously an argument that it probably didn't have to happen. I think it's probably a split hairs decision for me for the most part. I think I understood a little bit of why they did it. It didn't really take anything away from the race that Renegade ran. And yes, he is still technically listed as a maiden. I don't think he's going to be a winless horse for very long. And, when he was kind of striding out a little bit late in that debut, a long way behind It's Our Time, you always knew this was a horse that was going to get better with distance. And I think that's exactly what we're running into. Spice is Nice was the stakes winner around 2 turns. And Into Mischief Progeny, of course, can run any distance. But yeah, Paladin's very interesting. This is an ownership group that really brings together a lot of the same people that own Sierra Leone. I think it is exactly the same group, actually, from top to bottom. And this is a well-bred gun runner where they're looking to make a splash with him long term. The dam Secret Sigh was out of a dam named India, who was actually a really nice horse that Todd Pletcher trained and was a graded stake winner in her own right. Won the Cotillion at Philly when it was known as Philly Park, as well as the Azeri. So there's a lot of pedigree there for this horse to be effective going long. And you would assume that they're banking on that long term. So I'm interested to see Paladin and Renegade as much as anybody in there, to be honest, Joe. I also thought that, I'm not sure how good courting is, but it's obviously fun to see a son of cavorting going. Obviously this is a half to Clariere. So, or is it a full to Clariere? I think it's a full to Clariere. Yeah, I should know that. This is a horse that obviously is going to be really interesting going forward, seeing how good he is as he develops.
Yeah, no doubt. And we also have the Demoiselle, as I mentioned, shorter field, but a couple interesting horses there. And then the Elite Power Stakes, which has been renamed, used to be the Run Happy Stakes, but I guess they caught wind of Mattress Mac leaving the game and did not want to keep it as the Run Happy Stakes. So yeah, if you're out there on Saturday, soak it in. If you're, an Aqueduct regular like I am, it's going to be a great day of racing. It looks like the weather's dry, obviously going to be a little bit chilly, but we're going to be a little nostalgic about Aqueduct this week, as this weekend and I think Wood Memorial Day in the spring are going to be kind of the last 2 big days of racing at Aqueduct before it is kind of shuffled off to the dustbin of history. But yeah, looking forward to it. And we're always stoked about these kind of big races, this part of the card, because it's kind of the last call, as Nick mentioned. And hopefully we see some breakout stars and can spin them forward to big performances in 2026.
Yeah, this is the last big weekend for a while now, so we're not going to see anything really after this until Boxing Day.
All right, so that's going to do it for episode 115 of Rail Talk. Shout out to my buddy, my guy, Nick Tammaro, for another great show. It's always awesome having you on. Thank you for filling in so capably and so admirably. If you want to check out Nick, he's NTAM1215 on Twitter. Great follow. One of the best handicappers I know as well. So shout out to Nick. Appreciate you. Appreciate our producer, Patty Wolf, our associate producers, Julia Agresta and Nathan Wilkinson. Thank you guys for all the help. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to the show if you haven't already. Smash that button on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever. Patty doesn't like when I do it at the end of the show. She'd rather I do it at the top of the show, but I always forget. So if you are still listening and you haven't subscribed, please do so. And we'll see you next week back here on Rail Talk.